Paul Heyman finally speaks out. Shocking details about Seth Rollins' injury revealed. Is this the end of Seth Rollins as we know him? Paul Heyman just dropped a bombshell backstage that could change everything for WWE. In this explosive video, we break down Paul Heyman's emotional and chilling update on Seth Rollins' condition after his injury. With rumors flying and uncertainty swirling, Heyman pulls back the curtain and reveals what's really going on behind hospital doors. Is Rollins done for good? Or is there more to the story than WWE is letting on? What if I told you the architect of WWE's greatest matches may never walk into a ring the same way again? That the man who carried Monday Night Raw on his back, with charisma, fire, and pain running through every fiber of his body, just heard the most devastating words a wrestler can be told: "You'll be out for 9 months. Minimum." For weeks, fans speculated. The hush on commentary, the sudden silence in WWE's corridors, the no-show at Monday Night Raw, it all hinted at something serious. But now, the silence has broken. Not from Seth Rollins. Not from WWE's PR machine. But from the most unlikely man of all, Paul Heyman. In a moment few saw coming, Heyman, standing backstage in a dimly lit corridor just beyond gorilla position, looked into the eyes of a stunned interviewer and gave a message not coded in bravado or manipulation, but in stark, human reality. "Seth Rollins," he said, "is not okay. And I don't know if we'll ever see him in the ring the way we remember." The words weren't dramatic. They were surgical. Cold. And they landed like a thunderclap across the entire WWE universe. Because behind those words is a story far more painful than anyone imagined, a story not just about an injury, but about legacy, ambition, and the fear that it could all disappear in a heartbeat. The incident itself? Quiet. Routine. A simple misstep during a dark match following Raw's main event, the kind of match nobody was even supposed to see. But that night, fate didn't care about the card. As Rollins went for a leaping knee strike, his left foot landed just half an inch off center. That's all it took. That's all it ever takes. A sickening pop echoed in the small arena. Rollins collapsed. And just like that, the architect fell. Paramedics rushed to the ring. The crowd, confused, then hushed. Backstage, cameras stopped rolling. WWE personnel formed a wall around the ring, shielding fans and journalists from the brutal truth. Seth Rollins, screaming in pain, was stretchered out of the building and taken directly to a local hospital. At first, no one said a word. WWE issued a boilerplate statement: "Seth Rollins is being evaluated for a lower body injury." But insiders knew. The look on Triple H's face when the cameras turned off. The fact that Roman Reigns canceled a press appearance. And the rare sight of Becky Lynch flying in early the next morning with her daughter to be by Seth's side. Something was seriously wrong. Then came the MRI. Then came the X-rays. And finally, the doctor's words. A full medial collateral ligament tear, severe meniscus damage, and partial tearing of the anterior cruciate ligament. In layman's terms, fractured knee. Complete destabilization. A total shutdown of the joint. The only solution? Surgery. Followed by at least 9 months of intensive rehabilitation, if he's lucky. When the diagnosis was finally confirmed, those closest to Seth reportedly broke down. And it wasn't just because of the physical pain. It was what this meant. Seth Rollins was supposed to main event SummerSlam 2025. He was slated for one of the most anticipated showdowns in WWE history. And now? That spotlight has been ripped away. The match? Cancelled. The championship storyline? Abandoned. The vision of Seth Rollins walking down the ramp, fire in his eyes, fans screaming "Burn it down." Gone. At least for now, but while most remained silent, Paul Heyman, the mastermind behind decades of wrestling psychology, stepped forward with a revelation that shook WWE to its foundation. "You all see the pain," Heyman said. "What you don't see is the silence." According to Heyman, it wasn't just the physical trauma that stunned Seth. It was the mental collapse. The feeling of powerlessness. Of watching a future he crafted, segment by segment, crumble in a single night. This isn't just about missing SummerSlam, Heyman continued. This is about everything Seth sacrificed, his body, his family time, his sanity. And now? There's a real chance he may never get that moment back. Heyman, visibly emotional, paused before continuing. I've seen legends walk away. I've seen bodies break. But I've never seen a man like Seth cry in a hospital bed because he couldn't carry the company through one more summer. Those who know Paul Heyman know one thing: he doesn't say anything by accident. So for him to go off script like this? To speak from emotion, not agenda? It speaks volumes. Something deeper is unraveling. In fact, Heyman revealed something even more disturbing. According to him, Seth Rollins had refused pain medication for the first 2 days after surgery. Not out of strength, but out of guilt. He wanted to feel every inch of the failure, Heyman said. He kept saying, I should have listened to my knee weeks ago. I knew it was hanging by a thread. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the machine slow down. That guilt, Heyman explained, is what's haunting Rollins the most. Because to Seth, this isn't just an injury. It's a betrayal of his own body, of his own instincts, and of the company he loves more than anything. In the hours following the injury, Triple H, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, even Sami Zayn all reached out privately to express their support. But Heyman, ever the mind behind the curtain, warned that what's happening behind the scenes is even more fractured than people think. There are conversations, he said ominously. Real conversations about whether this injury changes everything. About whether Seth can be counted on as the top guy again. About if it's time to move on. And that, Heyman admitted, is what breaks him the most. Because I watched this man claw his way up from NXT to the Shield to the main event. I watched him become a father, a leader, a voice for the voiceless. And now they're talking about him like a number. Like a slot on the card to be filled. Make no mistake, WWE is a machine. And machines don't stop for broken gears. Already, there are whispers of a new #1 contender tournament. Already, names like Braun Breaker, Gunther, and even LA Knight are being floated to take Seth's place at SummerSlam. And yet, Paul Heyman's voice trembled when he said it, they're filling the spot, but they're not replacing the man. Because you don't replace Seth Rollins. You just pretend you can. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, away from the roaring fans and ruthless cameras, Seth is rebuilding, or at least trying to. Sources close to the family say he's gone quiet. No social media. No interviews. Not even calls from fellow superstars are getting through. Just Becky, their child, and the slow, agonizing process of healing. He's already had 2 surgical procedures. A 3rd may be required. And doctors have been blunt, even if the recovery goes perfectly, it will take everything, discipline, sacrifice, and luck, to get him back into a ring before WrestleMania 2026. But what if, this is it, what if Seth Rollins never makes it back to the top of the mountain? What if his legacy, his final match, has already been written and he doesn't even know it yet? These are the questions Paul Heyman dared to ask, not out of disrespect, but out of reverence. Wrestling takes everything from you, Heyman said. And then it asks for more. Seth gave everything. His body. His soul. And now it wants his future too. Yet, Heyman didn't end on despair. In fact, in his final words backstage, he offered something rare, hope. If I know Seth, Heyman said, he won't go out in a hospital bed. He won't end his story with a surgery report. He's going to write the next chapter, and it's going to burn brighter than ever. But it's going to take time. And time is the one thing WWE doesn't like to give. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not the injury. Not the absence from SummerSlam. But the fact that, in WWE, recovery isn't just about healing. It's about fighting to be remembered. About clawing your way back into a spotlight that moves faster than pain can fade. And as we speak, behind the sterile walls of a hospital room, Seth Rollins is beginning that fight. Not for a belt. Not for a pop. But for his place in a world that moves on without mercy, and for now, the architect waits backstage. The shift was immediate. You could feel it. There wasn't a press release. There didn't need to be. The energy changed the moment word got out that Seth Rollins was out of SummerSlam. Production meetings that used to buzz with strategy around his segment suddenly went quiet when his name came up. Triple H reportedly cancelled a creative roundtable, and when asked about SummerSlam's revised card, he gave a short, measured response, "We'll adjust." But behind those words was a deeper unease. Seth wasn't just a wrestler. He was the creative glue that held Raw together. Every major storyline from the last year, from his championship feud with Cody Rhodes to his uneasy alliance with Sami Zayn to the controversial tension brewing with Paul Heyman, ran through Rollins. Without him, everything was scattered. And worse, no one was ready. In private, the reaction wasn't just shock. It was fear. Fear that the card was collapsing. Fear that momentum was fading. But most of all, fear that Seth might never be the same. One producer reportedly said, "It's like losing your lead actor the night before the biggest scene." The locker room felt it, too. Sami Zayn, who had been scheduled to tag with Seth in an evolving factional storyline against Paul Heyman's growing influence, was said to be visibly shaken. Multiple reports stated that Sami visited Seth in the hospital days after the injury and sat with him for hours without saying much. The bond between those two wasn't just creative, it was personal. They had built trust in an environment where trust is rare. And now, one half of that foundation was gone. Back at the hospital, Becky Lynch stood in a place she knew far too well. Years earlier, she had faced injury and media scrutiny of her own. But this was different. This wasn't about titles or comebacks. This was about watching the man she loved, the father of her child, staring blankly at a television playing a Raw episode he should have been headlining. She had cancelled all commitments the moment she got the call. Her appearances, her media obligations, even her training for SummerSlam. She dropped it all to be at Seth's side. Friends close to Becky say that for the first time in years, she's scared, not because Seth might not wrestle again, but because for the first time, he's questioning whether he even wants to. The emotional weight is crushing. According to a nurse at the facility where Seth is recovering, he has refused visitors beyond Becky and close family. No friends. No trainers. Not even Roman Reigns, who offered to fly in privately just for a quick conversation. "Not yet," was reportedly Seth's only response. He's not ready. He doesn't want the world to see him like this, broken, bruised, lost. One anonymous WWE staffer described it as watching a lion in a cage, except the lion forgot why he ever wanted to fight. Meanwhile, the machine keeps moving. WWE doesn't pause. And so, conversations have already begun. Names are being floated. Who will replace Seth at SummerSlam? Who can carry the torch, even if just temporarily? Braun Breaker has momentum. Gunther brings legitimacy. And then there's the unexpected possibility of a returning legend, perhaps someone like Randy Orton or even a surprise NXT call-up. But none of them carry what Seth does. None of them walk into the arena and instantly set fire to the crowd's pulse. And that's where Paul Heyman re-enters the conversation. Because Heyman's silence didn't last long. Days after his first backstage statement, he followed up, this time not with press, but with WWE creative. And what he said may have shocked even the most jaded executives. Heyman reportedly pitched a segment for Raw, a tribute package to Seth Rollins. Not a retirement send-off. Not a eulogy. But a story. His story. One that could remind the audience, and the locker room, why Rollins matters. Why this moment is not just about the injury, but about the man. But the pitch was declined. Too soon, they said. Too emotional. WWE wanted to keep the machine running, not pause to mourn. That decision, according to insiders, infuriated Heyman. He allegedly stormed out of the meeting, telling a producer, "If this place can't honor its heart, then maybe it doesn't deserve it." And maybe Heyman was right. Because beneath the headlines and behind the tweets, what's really unraveling is the soul of Monday Night Raw. Seth Rollins wasn't just a performer. He was its conscience. Its chaos. Its constant. Without him, the show is a puzzle with a missing piece. And the fans know it. Social media has exploded with messages of support. #ThankYouSeth and #BurnItDownAgain began trending within hours of the injury confirmation. Fan art, tribute videos, and emotional reactions poured in from every corner of the wrestling world. Even AEW stars, yes, AEW, tweeted out support. That's how deep this runs. Because whether you love Seth Rollins or hate him, you can't deny what he brings to the ring, to the brand, and to the heart of WWE. But all the support in the world doesn't change what's coming. 9 months is a long time. It's a lifetime in wrestling. Titles change hands. Alliances shift. Legacies are rewritten in real time. And Seth Rollins will have to watch it all from a hospital bed, then a physical therapy facility, and eventually, if he's lucky, a training ring. But even then, the road back is uncertain. One WWE physician, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that while surgery went well, the recovery will be grueling and unforgiving. The damage to Seth's knee wasn't just physical. It was structural. Cartilage, ligament, tendons, all compromised. And for a performer whose entire in-ring style relies on explosive movement, agility, and the ability to adapt mid-air, this isn't just a challenge. It's a nightmare, and yet, he's not giving up. According to Becky, Seth is already asking questions. What rehab protocol is most aggressive? Who's the best recovery specialist in sports? How soon can he be cleared for light movement? He's watching footage, not just of his old matches, but of injuries. Edge, Triple H, even Bryan Danielson. He's studying comebacks like a scientist. Because if there's even the smallest chance that he can return at the level fans remember, he's going to fight for it. But that brings us to the most painful part of this story. What if WWE doesn't wait for him? Behind closed doors, executives are already moving on. Marketing teams are redesigning SummerSlam posters. Contracts are being renegotiated. Even the commentary team has been given a new directive. Minimize references to Seth unless absolutely necessary. The reasoning? Out of sight, out of mind. WWE doesn't like ghosts. And a sidelined superstar, no matter how beloved, becomes a liability when there's no date on the calendar for their return. But not everyone agrees. Some of the younger talent, names like Ricochet, Montez Ford, and even Dominic Mysterio, have reportedly voiced concern. Not just about the way Seth's injury is being handled publicly, but about the precedent it sets. If someone like Seth can be sidelined and silently phased out, what does that mean for the rest of them? Where's the loyalty? Where's the respect? It's a question that extends beyond the locker room. Because Paul Heyman wasn't speaking for himself when he broke the news. He was speaking for a generation of talent who have watched their bodies break under the weight of performance, only to be forgotten the moment they falter. This industry, Heyman once said, loves you when you're hot and buries you when you're hurt. And now, those words have never felt truer. Still, there's a pulse in the silence. A resistance. Heyman has not stopped talking. Insiders claim he's pushing for a long-form WWE documentary to be filmed chronicling Seth's recovery. Not for storyline purposes, but as a tribute. As proof that the man behind the character matters. Whether WWE greenlights it or not remains to be seen. But the fact that someone is fighting for it means something. It means the story isn't over. And then there's Becky. The one person who's not thinking about ratings, match cards, or merchandise. She's thinking about Seth's spirit. About the man she married. About their child, and how to explain why Daddy can't come with them to SummerSlam. Friends say she's been his rock. Not just in public, but in those quiet, terrible moments when Seth questions everything. She's reportedly told him more than once, "This isn't how your story ends. Not like this." And maybe she's right, because maybe, just maybe, this injury isn't the end of Seth Rollins. Maybe it's the beginning of a new chapter. One not defined by titles or promos, but by resilience. By the willingness to rebuild when everything is broken. And if there's anyone who can do that, it's the man who's burned everything down, and always risen from the ashes. For now, though, the arena lights dim without him. The music doesn't play. The fans chant his name, but there's no response. Just an empty spotlight and a chair that waits. Because somewhere, in a hospital bed laced with wires and painkillers, the visionary is dreaming of a return. Not just to the ring, but to himself, and he will return. Not because WWE demands it. But because he must. Because the story isn't finished. Because the flame hasn't gone out, because Seth Rollins still has something to say. In the days following Paul Heyman's emotional outburst and WWE's cold silence, the wrestling media exploded with headlines, theories, and speculation. Wrestling Observer, Fightful, Pro Wrestling Torch, all began publishing insider leaks and emotional tributes to Seth Rollins. But what was most telling wasn't the reporting. It was the tone. For the first time in years, even the most hardened critics weren't dissecting Seth's booking decisions or title reigns. They were writing about a man who had become the heartbeat of WWE. One columnist wrote, "Losing Seth is like a band losing its rhythm section. You can play the music, but it doesn't feel alive." Another said bluntly, "If Roman Reigns is the face of WWE, then Seth is its soul." But while the wrestling world mourned, the mainstream media picked up on a different story. The headlines didn't just say Seth Rollins injured. They said WWE SummerSlam shaken, Rollins' injury puts WrestleMania in jeopardy, and Paul Heyman breaks down. Because beyond the in-ring consequences, there's something larger unfolding, a very real, very visible fracture in WWE's internal culture. Heyman's public defiance. Triple H's corporate restraint. The locker room's quiet unrest. The absence of any real update from WWE itself. It all points to one chilling truth: the machine is beginning to eat its own. And then there's Becky Lynch. For all her toughness, all her resilience, she's now at the center of an emotional storm that no championship belt can shield her from. Friends close to the couple say Becky has been walking a tightrope. On one hand, she wants to be strong for Seth, the Rock, the motivator, the one who holds the household together. But on the other, she's dealing with her own shattered plans. Becky was slated for a marquee SummerSlam match. Now, with Seth sidelined, she's pulled back. Not because she had to, but because she couldn't stomach walking down that ramp while her husband lay behind closed doors, his future uncertain. "I'll go back when he's ready to watch again," she reportedly told one producer. "Until then, I'm not stepping through that curtain." That decision has caused waves inside WWE. Some are calling her selfish. Others are calling her real. But the truth is more complicated. Because in stepping back, Becky is sending a message, not just to fans, but to the company itself. A message that family matters. That healing matters. That maybe, just maybe, superstars aren't machines, no matter how often they're expected to perform like one. But even as Becky withdraws, there's an undercurrent building around her. Quiet pitches. Gentle nudges. WWE creatives who see an opportunity. They want to build a redemption arc, not just for Seth, but for Becky. A storyline where she carries the flag for her fallen husband. Where she fights, week after week, in his honor. But those close to Becky say she's not interested. Not now. "Let me be a wife first," she reportedly told a senior writer. The wrestler can wait. Still, the wheels turn. Because SummerSlam is coming. And whether Rollins is on the card or not, the show will go on. Braun Breaker is rumored to face Cody Rhodes now. Gunther may be inserted into the title picture. The rumored Shield reunion tease has been scrapped entirely. And Paul Heyman? He's been pulled from Raw appearances for creative reshuffling. But sources say it's more than that. They say Heyman is being muzzled, that his unscripted comments about Seth's injury weren't authorized. That his visible emotion was seen by some in the executive circle as damaging to the brand. Damaging. That's the word they used. As if a man mourning his colleague is a liability. As if honesty is now an act of rebellion, and maybe it is. Because in an industry built on illusion, Paul Heyman told the truth. A truth that cut through the noise, the promos, the chants, and reminded everyone what wrestling costs. The surgeries. The painkillers. The broken bones. The lost years. And the silence that follows when the lights go down and the crowd goes home. But not all silences are emptied. In the silence of Seth's hospital room, a new vision is forming. According to a close friend, Seth has begun journaling again, something he hasn't done since the early days of his NXT run. Not for public consumption. Not for social media. Just words. Raw, unfiltered, aching with questions. What now? Who am I without the ring? What's left when the crowd stops chanting? And in those pages, perhaps the beginnings of a comeback are taking root. Not a comeback built on hype or title shots, but on survival. On rediscovery. One nurse who's cared for Seth since his second procedure said, "He doesn't talk much, but when he does, he's asking about timelines, diet, rehab intervals. He's already building a routine in his head." That's how warriors think. Not in headlines. But in inches. In the little moments that build a second chance. Still, the public wants more. And that hunger, that obsession with answers, is starting to show cracks in WWE's tightly controlled messaging. Fans are asking, why hasn't there been a full statement from WWE? Why hasn't Triple H or Nick Aldis stood in front of a camera and addressed the injury that changed the course of their biggest event of the year? The truth may be simple. They're afraid. Afraid that if they acknowledge how deep this wound really is, the illusion of control will unravel. But the illusion is already unraveling. In hushed meetings and unapproved memos, there's talk of rewriting the next 6 months of programming. Of leaning heavier into Cody Rhodes and LA Knight. Of elevating younger talent to fill the gap Seth left behind. But no one can agree on the path forward. Because no one really knows who Raw belongs to anymore. It's not Roman's show. He's part-time. It's not Cody's yet. He's a crossover star, but still chasing something. It was Seth's. And now, that throne is empty, and maybe, just maybe, that's the most dangerous part of all this. The power vacuum, because in wrestling, power doesn't sit idle. It finds new hands. And the hands now reaching for it may not have Seth's vision, his discipline, or his integrity. Meanwhile, in Montecito, California, under the same roof that once heard the laughter of a child watching her parents train in their private gym, the mood is quiet. Soft. Heavy. Becky moves through the house like a shadow, keeping the family rhythm alive. And Seth, still limping, still braced, sits by the window, watching time pass in slow motion. They're not talking about titles. Not planning big returns. Just being. Just healing. And maybe that's the most radical act of all, because in a world that demands speed, performance, and perfection, Seth Rollins has been forced to do the one thing WWE never trains you for: pause, reflect, break, and if all goes well, rebuild. The next few weeks will decide everything. Whether WWE rewrites its loyalty. Whether Seth chooses patience over pressure. Whether Paul Heyman, silenced or not, continues to fight for the soul of this story. And whether Becky Lynch steps back into the ring, not as the man, not as the warrior, but as the wife of the man who gave his body for this business, and who might need her now more than ever. This is no longer a wrestling storyline. This is life. Messy, unfair, unpredictable. And yet, somehow, still full of hope, because the next roar of the crowd may still belong to Seth Rollins. It just won't be tomorrow. In the quiet haze of hospital corridors and the rhythmic beeping of machines that track every heartbeat, Seth Rollins stares at the ceiling more often than he stares at the television. Not because he's bored, but because it's the only place in the room that doesn't remind him of who he used to be. The championship photos on his phone, the matches replaying on mute, the fans tagging him in emotional edits with captions like "This isn't goodbye, it's see you later." All of it reminds him of the identity he fought to build, an identity that now feels like it's slipping through his fingers. Day by agonizing day, those closest to him say he hasn't said the word retire. Not once. But they've heard the hesitation in his voice. The pause when someone asks what comes next. The look in his eyes when he watches Becky playing with their daughter and doesn't immediately try to join in. It's not that he's disconnected. It's that he's in mourning. Not for a person, but for a possibility. The possibility that he might not return at 100%. That the fire that built the architect might now be smoldering in ways that can't be reignited with a simple promo or comeback pop. But grief is a tricky thing. It doesn't come in loud bursts. It creeps. It nestles into routine. It walks beside you during rehab. It whispers at night when you're alone. Seth has always been a fighter. But now, the fight isn't with an opponent in the ring. It's with doubt. With memory. With the version of himself he used to be. And somewhere between the recovery charts and the endless stretch of physical therapy bans, he's asking himself questions no wrestler wants to ask. Who am I if I can't burn it down anymore? And that's where Paul Heyman re-enters the picture, but not in front of a camera this time. Quietly, without a WWE mic or production team, he visited Seth unannounced. No cameras. No entourage. Just two men in a quiet hospital room, the mastermind and the visionary. The conversation was private, but insiders say the two spoke for nearly 2 hours. And when Heyman walked out, he wasn't his usual self. He looked drained. As if the words spoken inside that room were heavier than any promo he's ever delivered. When asked by a backstage producer if he was okay,